They trained you to worship happiness because happy people do not revolt. Happy people adapt. Happy people smile while their chains are tightened, one polished link at a time. From childhood, they fed you the same narcotic in different disguises. Be positive, be grateful, be content. Do not ask why you feel empty. Do not ask who benefits from your comfort. Do not ask why the world rewards obedience more than truth. Just breathe, smile, consume, repeat. That is not freedom. That is sedation with better branding. A man who is always chasing happiness becomes easy to manage because he will always choose what feels good over what is real. He will avoid conflict, avoid solitude, avoid the brutal mirror of self-knowledge. He will call weakness peace. He will call passivity wisdom. He will call surrender maturity. And while he is busy protecting his mood, other people are deciding his future. Machiavelli understood something most people are too drugged by comfort to admit. Power does not belong to the happiest man in the room. It belongs to the clearest. The one who can stand in cold reality without needing to decorate it. The one who is not ruled by pleasure, approval, or emotional anesthesia. Because the moment happiness becomes your highest goal, truth becomes your enemy, discipline becomes your enemy, sacrifice becomes your enemy, and that is exactly how obedient people are made. What you are about to hear is not another sermon about joy, balance, or inner peace. It is a dismantling, a ruthless autopsy of one of the most celebrated lies ever sold to the masses. Because the world did not turn happiness into a virtue out of kindness. It turned happiness into a commandment because sedated people are easier to predict, easier to pacify, and easier to rule. In these 6 chapters, you will see how the obsession with feeling good became a mechanism of control. You will see why discomfort is often closer to freedom than pleasure. Why dissatisfaction can be a signal of awakening, not failure. Why the man who stops asking how to be happy and starts asking who profits from his obedience becomes dangerous overnight. By the end, you will not be happier. You will be harder to deceive. Let's begin. The most effective prison is the one the prisoner mistakes for a lifestyle. That is why the command to be happy is so powerful. It does not arrive as a threat. It arrives as advice. Soft voice, clean language, friendly slogans. It tells you to protect your peace, trust the process, focus on good vibes, and let go of anything heavy. But hidden inside this sweet language is a political weapon, the removal of friction, the removal of resistance, the removal of the inner violence required to break a false life apart. A dangerous person is not always angry, but he is willing to be disturbed. He is willing to look at what the obedient refuse to examine. He can sit with dissatisfaction long enough to decode it. He understands that emptiness is not always a defect. Sometimes it is a signal. Sometimes the soul revolts before the mouth does. Sometimes the body grows tired because it is carrying a life it was never meant to live. But the modern world cannot allow you to interpret your pain that way. It must rename your unrest as dysfunction. It must convince you that any prolonged dissatisfaction is a personal failure to adjust. So instead of questioning the structure, you question yourself. Instead of confronting what humiliates you, you search for coping mechanisms. Instead of becoming free, you become better sedated. Machiavelli would have recognized this instantly. He knew that control works best when people police themselves, give them a moral ideal that keeps them passive, and they will protect the cage with their own hands. Tell them goodness means softness. Tell them peace means non-resistance. Tell them happiness is the goal, and soon they will fear anything that could wake them up. This is why so many people defend the very illusions that weaken them. They are not protecting truth. They are protecting emotional comfort, and comfort is often the final disguise of submission. So this is the real frame of the battle. Not happiness against sadness, not optimism against pessimism. It is sedation against consciousness. It is obedience against freedom. And most people never realize they chose their side the moment they made feeling good more important than seeing clearly. Chapter 1. The Pleasure Trap. The first lie is simple. They told you happiness was the reward for fitting in. Follow the script. Get approval. Avoid making people uncomfortable. Learn when to laugh, when to nod, when to pretend you agree. Do this long enough, and society hands you small doses of emotional sugar: praise, inclusion, temporary ease. A seat at the table, as long as you never question who built the table and who is beneath it, holding the weight. This is how obedience becomes pleasurable. Most people do not submit because they are forced to. They submit because submission is constantly rewarded with relief. The child who stops asking dangerous questions is called mature. The employee who swallows humiliation is called professional. The citizen who tolerates contradiction is called balanced. The friend who betrays his own instincts to remain accepted is called kind. At every level, the same lesson is repeated. Betray the deeper self, and you will be allowed to belong. That belonging produces a sensation many confuse with happiness. But look closely. It is not the joy of a free man. It is the relief of a monitored man who has learned he can avoid punishment by performing correctly. It is the comfort of reduced tension, not the power of authentic life. It feels warm because conflict has been postponed. It feels peaceful because truth has been gagged. It feels safe because the self has been edited into something less threatening. Machiavelli understood that rulers do not always need terror to maintain order. Often they need ritual, reward, and illusion. Give people a version of virtue that makes them easier to handle, and they will compete to wear their own leash. They will call restraint morality, even when it is fear. They will call conformity wisdom, even when it is cowardice. They will call obedience happiness, because the alternative requires a level of confrontation their spirit has grown too soft to endure. This is why so many people panic when real freedom begins to appear. Freedom is not instantly pleasurable. It is disorienting. It strips away the false rewards that once guided you. It forces you to see how much of your personality was negotiated for acceptance. It reveals that many of your desires were not even yours. They were implanted, rewarded, repeated until they felt natural, and that discovery does not feel good. It feels like loss. You lose the comfort of consensus. You lose the narcotic of easy validation. You lose the fake innocence of thinking your suffering came from personal weakness instead of structural conditioning. For a while, freedom feels like grief, because you are watching a false self die in real time. That is why most people run back. They run back to the familiar performance, back to smiling on command, back to language that offends no one and reveals nothing, back to goals that sound respectable but keep them spiritually asleep. They would rather remain pleasantly managed than painfully awake. Because awakening comes with a brutal tax, you must stop asking, "What keeps me comfortable?" and start asking, "What keeps me obedient?" The answer is often the same system that taught you to chase happiness in the first place. A sedated person does not rebel against routines that diminish him. He just decorates them. He buys better products. He learns better coping language. He turns his exhaustion into aesthetics. He builds an identity around surviving what he should have destroyed, and because he can still laugh, still post, still function, everyone assumes he is free. But functioning inside a cage is not freedom, it is adaptation. This is the first chapter of the trap. Happiness, as it is commonly sold, is not liberation from control. It is the emotional payment you receive for cooperating with it. And the more deeply you confuse that payment with freedom, the more elegantly your obedience disappears inside your own smile. Chapter 2. The Flight from Pain. The second lie is more sophisticated. They told you happiness comes from avoiding pain. So you learn to retreat from anything that disturbs your comfort. Hard conversations, necessary endings, humiliating truths, demanding ambitions. The parts of reality that would force a transformation in you were labeled unhealthy, toxic, negative, or simply not worth your peace. And little by little, your life became organized around emotional avoidance. This is how sedation deepens, not through chains, but through preferences. A man who worships comfort will always negotiate with what is destroying him. He will stay in degrading environments because leaving would be stressful. He will tolerate disrespect because confrontation would ruin the mood. He will postpone discipline because effort feels harsh. He will cling to numbing pleasures because they offer immediate relief from the friction of becoming someone stronger. Then one day he looks around and realizes his life has been designed by whatever he was too afraid to face. Machiavelli would call this a fatal weakness, because pain is not merely suffering. Pain is information. It tells you where the lie is. It tells you where the fracture lives. It tells you what your current form is, unable or unwilling to confront. But if you have been trained to treat all discomfort as an enemy, then you will spend your life anesthetizing the very signals that could have led you to power. This is what modern obedience looks like. Not marching, not saluting, numbing. A person does not need to be physically restrained when he has been taught to flee every inner battlefield that could harden him. He will censor himself before speaking. He will soften his standards before they isolate him. He will reduce his goals before they demand sacrifice. He will call this balance. He will call this healing. But often it is just fear with a more elegant vocabulary. Look at how many people spend their lives trying to remain emotionally untroubled. They do not want truth if truth burns. They do not want love if love demands courage. They do not want purpose if purpose requires destruction. They want a life that can be lived without too much tension, a life with enough pleasure to distract them and enough stability to keep them docile. They call that happiness, because calling it cowardice would force a reckoning, but nothing alive grows without friction. The body grows through resistance. The mind sharpens through contradiction. The will is forged through deprivation, pressure, failure, and repeated confrontation with its own excuses. Every serious transformation carries violence in it, not necessarily outward violence, but internal demolition. Illusions must be broken, habits must be strangled, dependencies must be exposed and starved. There is nothing comfortable about this process, which is exactly why obedient cultures teach you to avoid it. They know that a man who makes peace with pain becomes difficult to govern. Once you stop panicking at discomfort, the system loses one of its favorite tools. It can no longer threaten you with loneliness as easily. It can no longer control you with exclusion, delay, uncertainty, or temporary suffering. The moment pain stops being a reason to retreat, it becomes a weapon you can carry. You begin to understand that many of the things you once interpreted as signs to stop were actually thresholds, gates, initiations, tests designed by reality to separate the dependent from the sovereign, and that changes everything. Because now, you no longer ask, "How do I stay comfortable?" You ask, "What is this pain trying to reveal? Is it showing me where I am weak, where I am compromised, where I have accepted a life beneath my actual capacity?" The question itself is dangerous. It turns suffering into intelligence. It turns discomfort into strategy. It turns the emotional life from a nursery into a battlefield. That is why the cult of happiness must keep repeating the same message. Protect your peace, avoid stress, stay light, stay soft, stay regulated. Anything to stop you from discovering that much of your misery does not come from pain itself, but from your addiction to escaping it. The man who cannot endure discomfort becomes a servant to whoever can create or remove it, and then he calls the absence of pain freedom. It is not freedom. It is dependency with a softer face. Chapter 3, The Morality of Smiles. The third lie is the most dangerous because it sounds noble. They told you that happiness is a moral duty, not just a preference, not just a hope, a duty. You were taught that to be unhappy for too long is to fail in some invisible way, to disappoint others, to become difficult, to create tension in spaces designed for smoothness and control. So you learn to edit your face, censor your anger, soften your grief, and package your discontent into acceptable language. You learn that visible unrest makes people nervous, and nervous people punish what they cannot comfortably absorb. This is where obedience becomes self-betrayal. Because once happiness is treated as a virtue, every emotion that resists domination starts to look like sin. Rage becomes immaturity. Suspicion becomes negativity. Grief becomes weakness. Intensity becomes instability. And slowly, the very states that could have pushed you toward revelation are turned into things you feel ashamed for carrying. You do not just suppress them for social reasons. You begin to condemn them inside yourself. That is the masterpiece of the trap. The cage moves inward. Now no one needs to silence you because you silence yourself. No one needs to shame your unrest because you have already accepted the charge. You apologize for your instincts before they even fully form. You mistrust your own alarm. You question your own disgust. You stand in situations that poison you and wonder whether the real problem is your inability to stay peaceful. Machiavelli understood that morality is often weaponized not to elevate the strong, but to neutralize them. A society that fears dangerous men will always invent virtues that make danger look impure. It will praise sweetness over strength, pleasantness over perception, emotional manageability over fierce clarity. It will not say, "We want you weak." It will say, "We want you good." And because most people would rather be seen as good than be forged into something formidable, they accept the trade without seeing the cost. But a man who is always trying to appear emotionally acceptable becomes easy to domesticate. He starts choosing expressions that keep him likable instead of truthful. He avoids naming corruption because it sounds harsh. He avoids drawing hard boundaries because it feels cruel. He avoids necessary severance because it violates the image he has built of himself as evolved, calm, and kind. He becomes a curator of appearances, not a builder of power, and the world loves him for it because he is safe. He is no longer a threat to false structures. He no longer interrupts degrading patterns. He no longer produces the heat that forces hidden realities into the open. He has become morally polished and strategically useless, a beautiful instrument of his own containment. This is why so many people live with a quiet hatred they cannot explain. They obey every visible rule. They say the correct things. They perform emotional intelligence. They maintain the proper social temperature. Yet underneath it all, something in them is rotting, not because they are evil, because they are divided. One part is performing virtue, the other part knows it has been gagged for years. That inner split creates a special kind of misery, a clean misery, a socially approved misery, the kind that earns sympathy but never provokes transformation. You can function inside it for decades. You can build a life inside it. You can even be praised while carrying it, but it remains what it is, the suffering of a person who has confused moral presentation with freedom. Real freedom is not always pretty. Sometimes it makes you appear cold to warm manipulators. Sometimes it makes you appear severe to people invested in your softness. Sometimes it forces you to speak in ways that disrupt the emotional comfort of everyone around you, not because cruelty is the goal, but because truth is rarely welcomed by those who survive through illusion. A free person eventually understands that goodness, without discernment, becomes a doorway through which control walks smiling. That is why you must distrust any moral system that only praises emotional pleasantness. Ask what it produces. Does it create people who can confront corruption without trembling? Does it create people who can endure solitude for the sake of truth? Does it create people who can disappoint others without collapsing into guilt? Or does it merely create well-behaved personalities that know how to remain digestible? Most modern happiness is exactly that. Digestibility, mistaken for virtue. A person becomes easier to consume when he stops honoring the darker intelligence within him. The instinct that says no. The instinct that detects danger before reason can explain it. The instinct that refuses to smile while being reduced. The instinct that is willing to become inconvenient in order to remain intact. Kill that instinct, and obedience becomes elegant. Keep it alive, and happiness loses its sacred status. It becomes what it should have always been, a passing sensation, not a commandment, a byproduct, not a master. Because the moment you stop treating happiness as proof of goodness, you become available for a harsher and more powerful life. A life governed not by emotional appearance, but by uncompromised truth. Chapter 4. The Private Cage. The fourth lie is the one that keeps the machine clean. They told you happiness is personal, never political. So when you feel trapped, diminished, restless, or quietly dead inside, you are encouraged to interpret it as a flaw in your mindset, your habits, your gratitude, your emotional regulation. You are told to adjust yourself rather than examine the architecture around you, meditate harder, think better thoughts, reframe the problem, lower the noise inside your head, but never question the hands that built the room. This is one of the oldest tricks of power. Make suffering feel private, and rebellion dies in isolation. Because the moment a person believes his dissatisfaction is merely a defect in attitude, he stops investigating the structure that created it. He stops asking why his labor drains him but never frees him, why his relationships reward performance over truth, why every institution speaks the language of care while feeding on exhaustion, conformity, and psychological dependence. He turns inward, not in pursuit of clarity, but in service of self-blame. He becomes both prisoner and interrogator. Machiavelli would have seen the elegance in this immediately. The most efficient system is not the one that crushes opposition by force. It is the one that convinces people their suffering has nothing to do with power. Once that illusion is installed, the wounded start managing themselves. They diagnose themselves. They sedate themselves. They become intimate administrators of their own submission, and they do it with pride. This is why the modern cult of happiness is so useful. It converts structural dissatisfaction into individual pathology. If you are miserable in a humiliating job, perhaps you need better boundaries. If you feel empty in a culture built on spectacle and comparison, perhaps you need a gratitude journal. If you are disgusted by the falseness of social life, perhaps you are too cynical. The message is always the same. The environment is innocent, the arrangement is neutral, the system is fine. The problem is your failure to remain emotionally pleasant inside it. Once a society teaches this deeply enough, people begin defending the very conditions that deform them. They take pride in coping beautifully with what should never have been tolerated. They romanticize endurance without asking who profits from it. They call themselves resilient because admitting violation would threaten the identity they built around adaptation. They become experts in surviving bad arrangements. But survival, by itself, is not freedom. Sometimes survival is just prolonged obedience with better public relations. A free mind must eventually commit an unforgivable act. It must connect emotion to structure. It must ask why entire populations feel anxious, fatigued, isolated, and spiritually thin while being told they have never had more choice. It must ask why so many forms of visible happiness look like performance. It must ask why constant stimulation produces such deep numbness. It must ask why people are encouraged to express themselves endlessly, but only within forms that do not disrupt the machinery. This is where sedation begins to crack, because now unhappiness is no longer just a mood. It is evidence. It is testimony. It is a signal that something larger than the self may be misaligned, predatory, or false. And that realization is dangerous. Because when a man stops treating his pain as a private malfunction, he becomes harder to pacify with personal solutions. You can no longer hand him slogans and expect silence. He starts seeing patterns instead of episodes. He starts recognizing that many emotional states are not random. They are engineered consequences of lives built around extraction, performance, and dependency. His unhappiness is no longer a source of shame. It becomes the beginning of intelligence. That is the turning point. The obedient person asks, "How do I feel better inside this life?" The dangerous person asks, "What kind of life would require me to feel this way in the first place?" One question produces better adaptation, the other produces rupture. That is why the command to be happy must remain constant, because the moment enough people understand that their misery is not purely private, the emotional spell is broken. They begin to see that what was sold as wellness was often compliance. What was sold as peace was often suppression. What was sold as maturity was often learned helplessness in expensive language. And once you see that, you cannot return to innocence. You begin to understand that happiness, in the way it is commonly preached, is not merely an emotion. It is a management tool, a way of keeping the individual busy correcting his inner weather while the larger climate remains designed to weaken him, a way of making people feel responsible for enduring what should have made them revolt. That is not healing. That is containment. Chapter 5. The Gospel of Acceptance. The fifth lie is the sweetest and therefore the most poisonous. They told you happiness means acceptance. Accept yourself, accept your life, accept people as they are, accept what cannot be changed. On the surface, this sounds wise, mature, even spiritual. But hidden inside that language is a quiet campaign against transformation. Because when acceptance is preached without precision, it becomes a sedative poured over every wound that should have provoked action. A man can accept too early. He can accept conditions that were meant to be challenged. He can accept treatment that should have ended relationships. He can accept weakness that should have been trained out of him. He can accept mediocrity because fighting it would require a level of inner war he no longer has the appetite to wage. Then he calls this peace, when in reality it is exhaustion wearing the robes of wisdom. Machiavelli would have mistrusted this immediately. Not all acceptance is noble. Some acceptance is merely surrender that has learned to speak beautifully. A defeated spirit often hides inside language about balance, grace, and letting go, not because these things are always false, but because they can be used to sanctify powerlessness. A person stops resisting not because he has transcended conflict, but because conflict has beaten the hunger out of him. This is how sedated people survive themselves. They lower the standard, they soften the verdict, they stop demanding greatness from their own character. They say things like, "This is enough," "This is just who I am," "This is just how life works." Listen carefully to that tone. It is not freedom. It is the sound of a will negotiating terms with defeat. It is the voice of someone who would rather reinterpret the cage than risk breaking his hands against the bars. The modern world loves this version of acceptance because it produces low-maintenance souls, people who no longer expect too much from love, too much from work, too much from themselves, people who can endure contradiction indefinitely as long as it is named compassion. They become easier to manage because they have mistaken self-abandonment for inner peace. Their fire does not need to be extinguished by force. It only needs to be taught that burning is unhealthy. But there is a form of refusal without which no serious life can be built. A refusal to remain what comfort has made of you, a refusal to normalize disrespect, a refusal to make a home inside your own unrealized potential, a refusal to call passivity wisdom just because aggression has become unfashionable. This refusal is not always pleasant. It can make you severe, isolated, misunderstood. It can turn you against your own habits, your own excuses, your own sentimental attachments to a weaker identity, but without it, growth becomes theater, because every meaningful ascent begins with insult. Not insult from others alone, but from reality itself. The humiliating realization that you are living below your level, that your discipline is inconsistent, that your standards have been compromised by loneliness, lust, fear, and convenience, that your emotional life is still too easily bought by approval and too easily broken by rejection. A weak man hears this and runs toward acceptance. A dangerous man hears it and sharpens. He understands something the obedient cannot bear to admit. Not everything inside you deserves compassion. Some parts deserve starvation. Some impulses deserve restraint. Some patterns deserve execution. There are habits in a person that do not need healing. They need removal. There are stories he tells himself that do not need gentleness. They need contempt. There are identities he has outgrown that must be buried without ceremony. This is why the happiness machine keeps selling acceptance as the supreme answer, because a person at war with his lower nature is difficult to tranquilize. He is too alert, too demanding, too alive. He cannot be pacified with slogans about enoughness because he has seen what becomes of men who settle into themselves too early. They become predictable. They become soft in the spine. They become loyal to their limitations because their limitations have become familiar. And familiarity is one of sedation's favorite tools. It convinces you that because something is known, it is safe. Because it is safe, it is good. Because it is good, it should remain untouched. This is how whole lives rot in plain sight, not through chaos, but through stable decay. A man wakes up every day inside the same diminished patterns and calls it balance because nothing dramatic is exploding. But the absence of visible collapse does not mean the presence of freedom. It may only mean that decline has become organized. So the question is not whether acceptance has value. The question is, what exactly you are accepting. Are you accepting reality clearly so you can move within it with precision? Or are you accepting less than you should because demanding more would disturb your sedation? Those are not the same act. One is lucid, the other is submissive. A free person knows when to accept what is outside his control and when to declare war on what remains corruptible within him. He does not flatten both into the same moral gesture. He does not call every act of resignation maturity. He understands that peace purchased by self-betrayal is too expensive. He knows that some unrest is sacred because it protects the soul from adapting to what should never have been made normal. That is the deeper crime of false happiness. It teaches people to make peace with unfinished versions of themselves, to confuse self-permission with self-mastery, to treat the reduction of inner conflict as a victory even when that conflict was the only force trying to save them from stagnation. No, not all conflict inside you is dysfunction. Some of it is your higher nature refusing sedation. And if you silence that voice in the name of happiness, you may gain comfort, but you will lose the war. Chapter 6. The Throne of Sedation. The sixth lie is the final lock. They told you, happiness is the purpose of life. Once that belief is installed, everything changes. Now, every decision is judged by the same question. Does this make me feel good? Does this bring ease? Does this reduce tension? Does this preserve comfort? And with that single standard, a human being can be reduced to something terribly manageable, because a person who worships feeling good will eventually betray anything that demands suffering on the way to meaning. He will betray discipline when it becomes monotonous. He will betray truth when it becomes inconvenient. He will betray loyalty when it becomes costly. He will betray ambition when it becomes lonely. He will even betray himself, as long as the betrayal comes wrapped in temporary relief. This is why the doctrine is so effective. It does not need to forbid greatness. It only needs to make greatness feel unattractive. It only needs to train people to treat difficulty as a sign that they are on the wrong path. Then, the path of least resistance becomes their religion, and every force that could have forged them is slowly abandoned in the name of emotional well-being. Machiavelli would have seen the weakness in this instantly. A man whose highest goal is happiness can be manipulated through pleasure, fear, distraction, and reward. Offer him comfort, and he will compromise. Threaten his comfort, and he will retreat. Flood him with stimulation, and he will forget his mission. Give him enough entertainment, enough approval, enough small luxuries, and he will surrender his sovereignty, one appetite at a time, because he has made a fatal mistake. He has confused purpose with sensation. Purpose is not a mood. It is not a warm emotional climate. It is not the constant experience of enjoyment. Purpose is often severe. It demands repetition, sacrifice, uncertainty, and long stretches where no emotional reward arrives. It may isolate you. It may exhaust you. It may strip away entire identities that once made you socially acceptable. But it gives something happiness never can: direction, structure, weight, a reason to endure what lesser men escape through pleasure. A man with purpose can survive unhappiness. A man addicted to happiness cannot survive emptiness. That is why so many people collapse the moment life stops entertaining them. They were never trained to serve something beyond their own emotional state. They were taught to manage feelings, curate experiences, optimize moods. But when pain arrives, when meaning becomes difficult, when the world no longer mirrors back a pleasant reflection, they disintegrate. Not because they are uniquely broken, but because they were raised to believe that the absence of happiness is evidence that life has gone wrong. No, sometimes the absence of happiness is the price of becoming dangerous. There are seasons in a serious life that feel dry, heavy, and merciless. Seasons where you are building without applause, cutting away illusions without comfort, outgrowing people without replacement, learning restraint without reward. In those seasons, a weak philosophy will destroy you. If you believe happiness is the purpose, you will turn back. You will medicate the emptiness. You will seek stimulation, romance, noise, approval, anything that restores the feeling of lightness. And in doing so, you will abandon the harder road where real authority over the self is built. This is why entire cultures remain childish. They have been taught to treat discomfort as malfunction and pleasure as guidance. They follow what feels affirming. They flee what feels heavy. They organize their lives like addicts with better language. And because their choices are emotionally validated, they never notice how easily they are governed by appetite. The system does not need to overpower such people. It only needs to keep them entertained. But the person who breaks this spell becomes difficult to control. He no longer asks whether a thing makes him happy. He asks whether it makes him stronger, clearer, more sovereign. He no longer worships emotional brightness as proof of alignment. He understands that some of the most important choices in life feel terrible at first: ending the false relationship, leaving the degrading environment, killing the old identity, entering discipline, entering silence, entering solitude. None of these may feel like happiness in the moment, but they may be the beginning of freedom, and freedom is heavier than happiness. Happiness wants release. Freedom wants responsibility. Happiness wants comfort. Freedom wants truth. Happiness wants the pleasant day. Freedom wants the unconquered self. Most people never choose the second, because the first is constantly advertised to them in forms they can consume: smiling faces, easy advice, frictionless pleasure, emotional management disguised as wisdom. Everything around them says the good life is the comfortable life, the emotionally smooth life, the life where nothing cuts too deep and nothing demands too much. But nothing truly sovereign is built that way. A throne is not made of cushions. It is made of burdens carried without collapse. So in the end, the question is brutal and simple. Were you born to feel good, or were you born to become free? Because the two paths separate earlier than most people realize. One path trains you to avoid pain, preserve comfort, and remain digestible to the world around you. The other trains you to withstand loss, confront reality, and become someone whose inner life cannot be bought with sedation. They told you to be happy because happy people do not threaten the script. But the man who chooses freedom over happiness becomes unreadable to those who rule through comfort. And that is where obedience ends. So now you can see the full mechanism. They did not merely sell you an emotion, they sold you a philosophy of obedience disguised as wellness. They taught you to associate happiness with goodness, comfort with wisdom, acceptance with maturity, and emotional smoothness with a life well lived. But beneath all of it was the same design: keep the individual passive, keep him self-correcting, keep him too sedated to examine the structure, too comfort addicted to resist it, too morally trained to distrust the darker instincts that might have made him dangerous. First, they rewarded conformity until belonging itself felt like joy. Then, they taught you to avoid pain, so every hard truth became something to escape rather than decode. Then they moralized happiness, turning anger, suspicion, grief, and intensity into signs of failure instead of signs of perception. Then, they privatized your suffering, convincing you that your misery came from flawed thinking rather than the degrading arrangements surrounding you. Then they preached acceptance so early and so broadly that surrender began to look enlightened. And finally, they crowned happiness as the purpose of life, ensuring that anything requiring sacrifice, solitude, discipline, or inner violence would be abandoned the moment it stopped feeling good. This is how a human being is softened without ever realizing he has been conquered, not by open force, but by emotional programming, not by chains, but by preferences, not by visible tyranny, but by an inner standard that makes comfort feel sacred and discomfort feel wrong. Machiavelli would have understood the brilliance of this. The most stable subjects are not those crushed by fear, but those pacified by reward. Those who believe they are free because they are permitted to pursue pleasant feelings inside invisible limits. Those who call themselves balanced because they no longer possess the intensity required to rupture a false life. Those who confuse sedation for peace because they have forgotten what an awake soul actually feels like. And an awake soul is not always happy. It is alert. It is difficult to flatter. It is difficult to tranquilize. It can endure the ugliness of reality without collapsing into denial. It does not need every truth to feel good before accepting it. It does not worship inner comfort above transformation. It does not ask life to be emotionally smooth. It asks to remain inwardly unconquered. That is the standard you were never supposed to reach. Because the moment you stop asking whether life makes you happy and start asking whether it makes you free, the whole machine begins to lose its grip. You become harder to bribe with pleasure, harder to govern through fear of discomfort, harder to shame with moral language designed to keep you soft. Your pain starts speaking differently. Your dissatisfaction starts revealing patterns. Your restlessness stops feeling like failure and starts feeling like intelligence. Then, the sedation cracks. And when it cracks, you begin to understand something that obedient people spend their whole lives avoiding. Happiness is not useless, but it is a terrible master. It comes and goes. It rises and falls with chemistry, circumstance, illusion, novelty, and relief. Build your life around it, and your soul becomes a hostage to whatever can produce temporary ease. But freedom is built differently. Freedom is not the permanent experience of pleasure. It is the ability to stand in truth without needing to escape yourself. It is the ability to choose the harder road without demanding emotional anesthesia. It is the ability to remain loyal to what is real, even when reality arrives cold, silent, and merciless. That is why freedom carries a weight happiness never will. It demands responsibility. It demands discernment. It demands the death of childish philosophies. It demands that you stop treating your moods like commandments and start treating your life like a battlefield of forces trying to shape your will. Some of those forces want you entertained. Some want you agreeable. Some want you healing forever, adapting forever, smiling forever, as long as you never become dangerous. But the free person understands the game now. He does not reject happiness because he hates joy. He rejects its throne. He puts truth above mood, purpose above pleasure, clarity above comfort, and sovereignty above sedation. That is the real divide, not between happy people and unhappy people, between those who have been pacified by pleasant illusions and those who are willing to become strong enough to live without them. So let them keep preaching happiness to the masses. Let them keep decorating obedience with soft language. Let them keep calling sedation peace. Let them keep convincing people that a life without friction is a life well lived. You know better now. You know that some smiles are symptoms. Some calm is collapse. Some acceptance is surrender. Some happiness is nothing more than a tranquilizer given to people who are slowly being taught not to resist. Freedom was never going to feel warm all the time. It was never going to flatter you. It was never going to protect you from loneliness, sacrifice, or the brutality of seeing life without cosmetics. But it gives you something no sedative ever can: yourself. Not the edited self, not the socially manageable self, not the pleasant, polished, obedient version shaped for other people's convenience. The real one. The one that can stand in truth without begging for comfort. The one that can endure emptiness without filling it with noise. The one that can walk through pain without turning it into an excuse for retreat. That is the self they fear, because that is the self they cannot easily rule. Like if you are done worshiping comfort, subscribe if you are ready to choose freedom over sedation. Comment with the moment you realize feeling good was not the same as being free.